My dad stood on the stage at my brother's Navy SEAL graduation gala, holding up my old, scratched military camp ID. "She quit camp in 2 weeks," he bellowed into the microphone, chuckling before the 2,000 guests. The crowd snickered, their eyes scanning the room until they found me standing silently by the back wall, dressed in a plain black trench coat. Dad took the ID, threw it onto the polished floor, and crushed it deliberately under his heavy boot. He thought he was giving the crowd a funny family joke, cementing my status as the ultimate family disappointment. But then, my brother walked off the stage to hand me his diploma. As I unbuttoned my coat to hug him, his eyes dropped to the dress uniform underneath. He saw my hidden Silver Star medal, gasped, and dropped his diploma to the floor, whispering, Dad, she outranks everyone." My name is Maya, and at 26 years old, I had long since accepted my role as the permanent black sheep of the Whitaker family. Our household was run like a strict military dictatorship by my father, a retired, hard-nosed commander who believed a person's worth was measured solely by the badges on their chest and the medals on their wall. To him, you were either an elite soldier or you were nothing. My younger brother, Logan, was the undisputed golden child, the perfect specimen who had just successfully endured the brutal trials of Hell Week to graduate as a Navy SEAL. I, on the other hand, was the ultimate family disappointment. For 12 long years, my father had used me as a cautionary tale, constantly mocking me for failing a basic military youth camp when I was just 14. According to his version of history, I was a weak quitter who couldn't handle the dirt and went home crying after only 2 weeks. Now, we were sitting inside the grand, high-profile military gala hall, surrounded by 2,000 elite guests, politicians, and high-ranking officers who had all gathered to celebrate Logan's graduation. I sat at the very back of the room, keeping my long black trench coat buttoned tight, watching my father march proudly up to the stage microphone. I knew exactly what was coming. He couldn't just praise his golden son. He had to cement his own legacy by publicly reminding everyone in this room how much of a failure his daughter was. The spotlight glared down on my father as he adjusted the microphone, his voice echoing through the massive ballroom. He held my old, scratched camp ID card high in the air, a smug grin plastered across his face. "You see, true grit isn't born, it's tested," he bellowed, looking out over the crowd. "And some people simply don't have it. Take my daughter Maya, for instance. 12 years ago, I sent her to a premier military camp. 2 weeks. That's all she lasted before she broke down, crying for home because she couldn't handle the dirt and discipline." A ripple of snickers and low whispers cascaded through the rows of elite military families, politicians, and decorated officers. 2,000 pairs of eyes began scanning the room, quickly pinning me against the back wall. The humiliation was heavy, burning hot against my face, but I kept my posture rigid and my lips tightly sealed. This was Logan's big night, his moment of hard-earned glory, and I refused to ruin it by causing a scene. I just stood there, enduring the collective pity and scorn of the crowd. On stage, Logan shifted uncomfortably, his grip tightening on his dress cover. He looked down at our father, a flicker of deep unease crossing his face. Logan knew our father's arrogance, and he could sense that something about this story didn't add up, but military discipline kept him locked at attention, waiting for the agonizing mockery to end. What my father and the snickering crowd didn't know was the dangerous classified truth behind my sudden departure from that youth camp 12 years ago. I hadn't broken down, and I hadn't shed a single tear. In reality, my performance during those first 2 weeks had completely shattered the camp's historic records. My unprecedented tactical awareness, advanced survival instincts, and perfect marksman scores hadn't just impressed the local instructors. They had triggered a silent alarm in the highest echelons of the military. Before the third week could even begin, a specialized, deep-covered Joint Ops Division had quietly swooped in and pulled me out of the program. To protect the highly sensitive nature of my recruitment, the commanders fabricated a perfect cover story. They told my father that I simply lacked the mental fortitude and had washed out. Because of his immense arrogance and deeply ingrained biases, he swallowed the lie whole, never bothering to look deeper. For the next decade, while my father openly mocked my imaginary failure, I was undergoing some of the most brutal, specialized training on the planet. I lived a double life, executing high-risk classified operations in shadow zones across the globe under a completely off-the-books branch. Whenever I visited home, I pretended to hold a boring, mundane desk job in a completely different state. I let him believe I was weak, knowing that the truth was a weapon he wasn't cleared to hold. Logan stepped forward on the stage, the heavy gold-trimmed diploma clutched firmly in his hand. The applause swelled, led by our father who was practically beaming with pride. But instead of turning toward the front row to embrace our father and the waiting photographers, Logan's eyes remained locked on the back of the room. He marched down the wooden steps of the stage with crisp, deliberate strides, ignoring the outstretched hands of the dignitaries. The crowd fell silent, their heads turning in unison as they watched the newly minted Navy SEAL walk straight toward me. As he reached the back wall, a tight, emotional smile broke across his face. I didn't want to hide from him anymore. Slowly, I reached up and unbuttoned the top of my heavy black trench coat, pulling the thick fabric aside so I could properly embrace my little brother. The moment the coat parted, Logan went entirely rigid. His eyes dropped to the pristine dark blue officer's dress uniform hidden underneath. His gaze tracked the rows of highly advanced command bars, the elite insignia, and then stopped dead on the distinctive gleaming metal of the Silver Star for Extraordinary Valor pinned directly to my chest. Logan understood military heraldry perfectly. He knew instantly that the uniform didn't just represent a high rank, it represented a level of sacrifice and elite operational authority that few humans ever achieved. His jaw dropped, his breath catching sharply in his throat. The sheer shock paralyzed him, and the official Navy SEAL graduation diploma slipped straight from his fingers, clattering loudly against the floor. The microphone on the nearby podium was still live, humming softly as it picked up Logan's trembling words. He didn't look back at the stage. His wide, terrified eyes remained glued to my chest. "Dad? Stop talking," he stammered, his voice echoing clearly through the speakers and cutting right through the residual murmurs of the room. "Please, just stop. She outranks everyone in this room." A suffocating wave of stunned silence instantly washed over the 2,000 guests. The snickers died mid-breath. People in the front rows stood up, straining their necks to get a better look at the back wall, while the officers closer to me began leaning in, their eyes widening as they recognized the pristine cut of my dress uniform and the undeniable weight of the decorations pinned to it. They realized that the woman who had just been publicly branded a cowardly failure was actually a highly decorated special operative standing at the pinnacle of military command. Up on the stage, my father's smug, triumphant smile completely evaporated. He froze, his hand still resting on the podium as his face rapidly turned from flushed red to a ghostly, hollow pale. He looked across the sea of staring guests, his eyes locking onto my exposed uniform, and the absolute gravity of his public blunder finally crashed down on him. A 4-star general sitting in the front row suddenly stood up, his eyes locked onto my insignia. Without a second of hesitation, he raised his hand to his brow and snapped a crisp, perfectly formal military salute directly toward the back of the room. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as, one by one, every high-ranking officer, veteran, and active-duty soldier in the ballroom followed his lead, turning to face me and raising their hands in absolute respect. My father practically stumbled down the stage steps, his boots heavy against the wood as he hurried toward us. His commanding presence was entirely gone, replaced by a desperate, sweating confusion. "Maya, what is this?" he stammered, his voice cracking as he reached the back wall. "Why didn't you tell me? I'm your father. I had a right to know." I looked at him calmly, keeping my posture elegant and unbothered. "Because true service doesn't require a loud microphone, Dad," I replied quietly, my voice carrying effortlessly in the silent room. "And it certainly doesn't require the validation of a crowd." Logan stepped up beside me, his shoulder brushing mine as he stood at rigid attention. He looked at our father, then back at me, a profound look of pride taking over his face. He finally realized that the older sister he had spent years trying to protect from our father's harsh judgment didn't need protecting at all. She had been operating in the deep shadows, fighting battles at a level of elite authority he could only dream of achieving. I didn't wait around to watch my father try to piece his shattered pride back together. I simply turned, stepped right over my old, crushed camp ID lying on the polished floor, and walked out of the gala hall with my head held high. I had completely dismantled 12 years of his arrogance without shouting a single angry word. 3 months later, I officially retired from active field operations to take a leadership role training the next generation of deep cover operatives. Logan went on to serve with distinction in the SEAL teams, and our relationship became stronger than ever, built on mutual respect between equals. As for my father, the video of his public blunder circulated quietly through the military community, permanently staining his reputation. He tried to call me several times to apologize, but I kept my distance. True strength isn't about holding a grudge. It's about realizing you no longer need the approval of the people who tried to break you. Now, I'm curious about those of you listening to my story. What would you have done if you were standing in my shoes at that gala? Have you ever had a family member constantly doubt your potential? Let me know in the comments below. Meanwhile, I'm leaving 2 other incredible stories on the screen that I know will absolutely surprise you. Thank you so much for watching until the very end.